There is a sentence that many people are afraid to say out loud. A sentence that sounds simple on the surface, yet carries enough emotional weight to make others question your character. That sentence is this: I don't like having visitors. The moment those words leave your mouth, people begin making assumptions. They imagine loneliness. They imagine bitterness. They imagine social anxiety, arrogance, coldness, or emotional distance. Society has trained us to believe that an open door is proof of a healthy soul and that a closed door must be hiding something dark behind it. But what if the opposite is sometimes true? What if the person who protects their space is not rejecting humanity at all? What if they are protecting something sacred? What if their reluctance to welcome constant visitors is not a symptom of disconnection, but evidence of a deep relationship with their inner world? Carl Jung spent much of his life exploring the hidden architecture of the human psyche. He understood something that modern culture often forgets. The human soul does not grow only through interaction. It also grows through solitude. Most people spend their lives running from silence. They fill every empty moment with noise, conversations, entertainment, notifications, opinions, and distractions. They are surrounded by people every day, yet they rarely meet themselves. They know the preferences of strangers, but not the desires of their own soul. They know how to keep a conversation alive, but they have never learned how to sit alone with their thoughts without discomfort. And that discomfort is revealing, because silence acts like a mirror. The moment external stimulation disappears, something fascinating happens. The mind begins speaking. Forgotten emotions rise to the surface. Hidden fears emerge from the shadows. Questions we have avoided for years suddenly demand answers. Many people do not fear being alone. They fear what they might discover when they are. Jung believed that every human being carries an unconscious world beneath the surface of awareness, a world filled with forgotten memories, unrealized potential, hidden wounds, and unexplored truths. To encounter that world requires something increasingly rare in modern life. It requires solitude. The person who does not enjoy frequent visitors may not be avoiding people. They may be protecting the conditions necessary for self-discovery. Think about it. Every visitor brings energy. Every conversation brings expectations. Every interaction requires adaptation. We adjust our language, our behavior, our emotional state, and our attention. Even pleasant company requires psychological resources, and for certain individuals, especially those with rich inner lives, those resources are precious. Their home is not merely a building. It is a sanctuary. It is the place where the masks come off. It is the place where performance ends. It is the place where they reconnect with themselves. When someone enters that space, the atmosphere changes. The psychological environment changes. The rhythm changes. For some souls, that change feels costly, not because they dislike people, because they value depth. Jung often emphasized the importance of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are rather than who the world expects you to be. Individuation requires reflection. It requires introspection. It requires the courage to explore dimensions of yourself that cannot be discovered in a crowd. A person who guards their solitude may be engaged in that process. Whether consciously or unconsciously, the world sees isolation. The soul experiences exploration. Now, this does not mean every person who avoids visitors is spiritually evolved. Some people withdraw because of fear. Some withdraw because of pain. Some withdraw because they have been wounded and no longer trust others. But that is not the whole story. The mistake we make is assuming that solitude and dysfunction are the same thing. They are not. A mountain is solitary. An ocean depth is solitary. A seed buried beneath the earth is solitary. Yet all of them contain tremendous life. Growth often happens away from the crowd. Transformation often happens in private. The most important conversations you will ever have may occur in complete silence. Jung understood that every person has an authentic self buried beneath layers of social conditioning. Discovering that self requires distance from constant external influence. It requires moments where no one is telling you who to be, what to think, what to desire, or how to feel. When visitors leave, a different voice becomes audible. your own. And that voice is easy to lose, especially in a culture that rewards constant availability. Today, many people feel guilty for wanting personal space. They apologize for needing time alone. They explain, justify, and defend their boundaries as though privacy were a crime. But boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are filters. They determine what enters your psychological world and what does not. A soul without boundaries becomes crowded. And a crowded soul struggles to hear its own wisdom. The person who says, "I don't like having visitors," may be expressing something far deeper than a preference. They may be saying, "I need room to think. I need room to create. I need room to heal. I need room to understand who I am." And there is dignity in that. There is strength in that. There is wisdom in recognizing that not every empty room is lonely and not every crowded room is connected. Some of the loneliest people on earth are surrounded by others. Some of the most fulfilled people on earth spend significant time alone. The difference is not the number of people present. The difference is the quality of the relationship with oneself. Jung believed that what we refuse to confront internally eventually controls us externally. That means every hour spent honestly examining our thoughts, motives, fears, and desires is not wasted time. It is psychological work. It is soul work. And soul work requires space. The next time you meet someone who values privacy, resist the urge to diagnose them. Resist the urge to label them antisocial, distant, or strange. Instead, consider another possibility. Perhaps they have discovered something that many people never learn. Perhaps they understand that solitude is not the absence of connection. It is the birthplace of authentic connection, because only when you know yourself can you truly know another person. Only when you are comfortable in your own company can your relationships become free from dependency. Only when you have explored your inner world can you bring your whole self into the outer world. So if you find peace in quiet rooms, if you cherish uninterrupted evenings, if you protect your personal space, do not automatically interpret that as a flaw. Ask a deeper question. What part of your soul is asking for that silence? What truth is waiting to be heard? What wisdom is trying to emerge? The answer may reveal that your desire for fewer visitors is not a rejection of humanity at all. It may be an invitation to meet the person you become when everyone else leaves and only your soul remains. There is a strange guilt that follows certain people through life. It appears whenever they decline an invitation, whenever they hesitate before opening the door, whenever they choose a quiet evening alone instead of filling their home with visitors. Society immediately begins its interrogation. Why are you so distant? Why do you keep to yourself? Why don't you enjoy having people around? Hidden beneath these questions is an assumption that has become deeply rooted in modern culture. The assumption that constant social interaction is proof of psychological health. But Carl Jung would have challenged that assumption. He understood that the human soul is far more complex than the social rules created by society. He knew that some people are nourished by crowds, while others are nourished by solitude. He knew that the desire for privacy is not always a sign of emotional weakness. Sometimes it is a sign of psychological depth. The average person spends a lifetime learning how to navigate the external world. They learn how to communicate, how to work, how to compete, how to gain approval, how to fit in. Yet very few spend the same amount of time learning how to navigate the inner world. They know the geography of cities, but not the geography of their own minds. They understand the opinions of strangers, but remain strangers to themselves. They can describe the personalities of friends and family members in remarkable detail, yet struggle to explain their own fears, motivations, and hidden desires. Jung recognized this imbalance long before most people did. He saw that human beings had become experts in external adaptation while remaining beginners in self-understanding. When someone says, "I don't like having visitors," people often hear rejection. But perhaps what they are really hearing is self-preservation. Perhaps they are hearing someone protect the fragile connection they have built with their inner world. The home, for many individuals, is not merely a place to sleep. It is a psychological sanctuary. It is the one environment where they can stop performing. Every day, people wear masks. They wear professional masks, social masks, family masks, and cultural masks. They adjust themselves to meet expectations. They monitor their words, their facial expressions, and their behavior. They become who they believe they need to be in order to function successfully within society. Eventually, this constant adaptation becomes exhausting. Then they return home. And for a brief moment, they can simply exist. No performance, no expectations, no audience. The individual who protects that space may not be protecting a building. They may be protecting the only place where they can hear their own thoughts clearly. Jung believed that within every person exists a vast unconscious world. Most people imagine the unconscious as a dark basement filled with fears and painful memories. But Jung saw something much greater. He believed the unconscious also contained wisdom, creativity, intuition, and unrealized potential. The problem is that this hidden world rarely speaks loudly. It whispers. It communicates through symbols, dreams, emotions, and subtle intuitions. To hear it requires silence. To understand it requires attention. To integrate it requires time. And that is precisely why some people become protective of solitude. The modern world has become addicted to noise. Notifications compete for attention. Conversations never end. Entertainment follows people everywhere. Silence has become so rare that many individuals feel uncomfortable the moment it appears. They reach for a screen, turn on music, start a conversation, or search for another distraction. Anything to avoid being alone with their thoughts. But what if those thoughts contain something important? What if the discomfort people experience in silence is not evidence that silence is dangerous, but evidence that silence is revealing? Jung understood that growth often begins where distraction ends. The person who dislikes unexpected visitors may understand this on an instinctive level. They know that every interruption pulls attention outward. Every social encounter shifts energy away from reflection. Every visitor changes the atmosphere of the environment. Even positive interactions require adaptation. The nervous system adjusts. The mind shifts focus. The internal dialogue becomes quieter while the external dialogue becomes louder. Over time, people with rich inner lives begin to notice something. They notice that their best insights emerge when nobody is around. Their deepest realizations arrive during moments of solitude. Their creativity flourishes in silence. Their emotional healing accelerates in privacy. Their understanding of themselves becomes clearer when external voices fade into the background. This realization changes everything. Suddenly, solitude stops feeling like deprivation. It starts feeling like nourishment. The world often misunderstands this distinction. It assumes that people seek solitude because they have failed socially. Yet history tells a different story. Many of humanity's greatest thinkers, writers, artists, philosophers, and visionaries deliberately withdrew from constant social engagement, not because they hated people, but because they valued depth. They understood that insight requires incubation, wisdom requires reflection, transformation requires space. Jung repeatedly emphasized the importance of individuation, the process through which a person becomes their authentic self. This journey cannot be completed through imitation. It cannot be achieved by constantly following the crowd. Individuation requires a confrontation with one's own psyche. It requires honesty. It requires courage. Most importantly, it requires periods of isolation from collective influence. Think about how often people allow others to determine who they are. They absorb opinions without questioning them. They adopt goals without examining them. They pursue success according to definitions they never created. They become so busy meeting expectations that they lose contact with their authentic nature. Then one day they wake up and realize they have built an entire life around someone else's idea of fulfillment. The soul pays a price for that. The individual who values privacy may be trying to avoid this trap. They may be protecting the psychological space necessary to hear their own voice before it becomes drowned out by everyone else's. There is another reason some people dislike having visitors, and it has little to do with social ability. It has to do with energy. Certain individuals experience social interaction differently. They absorb emotional information deeply. They notice subtle shifts in tone, body language, mood, and atmosphere. Their minds process enormous amounts of information during every encounter. What appears effortless from the outside can be surprisingly demanding internally. These people often need periods of withdrawal, not because they dislike human beings, but because they need time to recover their equilibrium. Society frequently mistakes this recovery process for antisocial behavior. Jung would have recognized it as something else entirely. He would have seen it as the psyche's attempt to maintain balance. Just as the body requires rest after physical exertion, the mind requires rest after psychological exertion. Without that recovery period, exhaustion accumulates, clarity fades, authenticity weakens, the soul begins to feel crowded. And perhaps that is the deepest truth hidden beneath the statement, "I don't like having visitors." Perhaps it is not about visitors at all. Perhaps it is about protecting a relationship, not a relationship with another person, a relationship with oneself. Because when the door closes, when the noise disappears, when the expectations fade, something remarkable becomes possible. The individual finally encounters the one person they can never escape.